by today's standards, H.P. Lovecraft was considered a xenophobic, isolated maniac who had various psychological issues. I mean, both his parents went crazy and died. Life was cruel and unusual to poor old H.P., but fortunately for us, he redefined horror for decades to come. These echoes of his haunting words are heard in some well-known and very popular films. But what about adaptations of his stories specifically? Well, here's 4 Lovecraft films that you need to see. First up is the film Dagon, a film directed by Stuart Gordon, R.I.P. Dagon was my first Lovecraft film. Even though it's named Dagon, the film's adaptation is actually of the story The Shadow over Innsmouth. Ezra Godden stars as Paul, along with his girlfriend Barbara, played by Raquel Morono. Both actors are wonderful in this film, and even though it's not a great film, it is very atmospheric and it really gets the feeling of being stuck in a Lovecraft story. So even though it's not for everyone, I have a lot of love for this film, mostly due to the look and the characters, so I highly recommend it. Next up is Lurking Fear. Now, I know this is barely an adaptation of his story, but I think it could be a pretty decent film. After having watched it twice, I know it's bad, but I still think there's something there it could really work. The creatures are horrifying freaks. I mean, their practical effects, makeup, and everything are fantastic. It's really amazing. As long as they kept the look of those monsters, because the look is cool as hell, and they remade this film, I think it could really work. If you watch this version, though, you'll probably be bored for a lot of it until it gets to the good parts with said creatures. Third up is another film from director Stuart Gordon and producer Brian Yunza, From Beyond. You see, I put Lurking Fear on here because if I hadn't, it would pretty much just be 6 Stuart Gordon films, so I had to narrow it down and kind of mix it up a bit. Now, I'm sure most of you know that Reanimator starring Jeffrey Combs is a classic, but From Beyond is kind of the direct follow-up, right? I think it's a year after, and it's got most of the cast, including director and producer. So if you throw in some dimensional barriers and creatures, Kin Foray from Dawn of the Dead, and, being a badass in his underwear, and Barbara Crampton in leather, and what you got is From Beyond. And From Beyond itself is a recipe for madness. Once again, amazing practical effects really make this film engaging and often disgusting and disturbing all at the same time. I love the very end though. I mean, I even feel that H.P. Lovecraft would approve of the additions to it. Well, not the sexy parts. Probably drive me a little crazy. Last but not least is the Call of Cthulhu by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. Filmed in the style of a 1928 silent film, this was made with love and dedication. Both the effects and the overall look of the film is something that really looks amazing, considering that it would be on what most people would call a very low budget. They managed to surmise the entire tale, ending with the big guy himself showing up with all his squiddy bat wrath. If you don't like black and white films or silent films, I guess you might want to skip it, but I highly recommend it because I do feel it's a visual summary of the entire Call of Cthulhu story. A story that is still haunting our hearts and minds to this day. I mean, if you listen closely, you might even hear the call. What's that? Oh, that's just ridiculous.